Hi everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids. Today's video is a very important one. We're going to be talking about pretty much the next set of champions you want to be taking out of your vault or regearing or building up to take on the new Hydra, because Hydra's getting a big nerf actually coming on Tuesday. So watch out for that, guys. Tuesday is when it comes out, one day before the reset. So don't use your keys yet. Save them until Tuesday if you will have time on Tuesday. It's going to be in the middle of a personal rewards CVC, but you can actually get some keys into this nerfed Hydra on the very last day before it resets. Maybe get yourself some better rewards. So watch out for that. Obviously, I'm just back from holiday. I'm sick with COVID, so I feel pretty crap, and my voice, my throat's not quite right. So apologies if I am a bit off in today's video. Words are hard. But yeah, let's dive in, right? Let's just go. Let's get this done. So these are the changes, right? These are the nerfs that are coming in. All these stats decrease for all difficulties. The health, attack, and defense of the Hydra heads. We don't know by how much yet. Could be a significant change, could be very small. I don't know. I think definitely lowering its attack is just a win for pretty much all players. Makes it easier to keep your team alive. So I think especially for newer players, that's a pretty big deal, right? Just not being killed by the Head of Wrath, for example, is pretty huge. Lowering the HP could be good or bad. This could make max HP nukers much worse if it's lowered a lot. Really don't know how much they're going to lower it by. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. Maybe we can decapitate them more and get throw more damage into decapitated heads. Don't know. And then the defense going down. I think this is very good as well. The defense for the Hydra heads is actually really high. And it basically means that for hard difficulty, you're kind of fine. But when you get even to brutal, as it is now, brutal and nightmare, traditional damage dealers are just essentially useless compared to bringing in max HP nukers like Royal Guard or Husk are just so much better at that point. There's just no purpose really for traditional damage dealers. So we'll see if that mixes this up. Countdown for Mark of the Hydra increased from 16 to 20 turns. This is also brilliant, gives you a lot more time before the first Devour, and then also there's going to be a long time before the second Devour as well. That's also going to be pushed longer. It's going to make it more forgiving to your team for that first section of the fight for sure. It's going to stretch out the fight. It's really good. And they're also going to make it easier to break champions free on every difficulty level except for Nightmare, which I think is totally fair as well. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Again, this makes it just much more forgiving. So I think these are great changes. Okay, and then for these particular heads, it's really this one at the bottom. That's the big one I want to talk about today. But first of all, Head of Mischief, the buff spread skill. Cooldown's going from 3 to 4 turns. So I guess that's a nice sort of minor buff. I'm not sure how much that's going to affect things, especially considering it's A1 is actually quite like just stealing your buffs and stealing your turn meter is actually quite nasty. Sometimes you're kind of happy when he does his A2. If you've blocked buffs out there, you're like, yes, okay, cool. He wasted a turn. This is great. So this might be, I don't know if it's going to make much effect. Head of Wrath is going to have less defense, even more so proportionately than everything else, which is having its defense lowered. Don't know what this is going to do, but it could be big. We'll see. And then this one is the really big one. The Head of Decay is now going to be vulnerable to provoke. So Head of Decay is the head that, as of right now, basically has no counterplay. Yeah, he just cleanses all your debuffs off. He puts the shields out that cleanse all your debuffs, and you have to break the shield. All that sort of stuff. Very difficult. Now you're going to be able to provoke him, which is just going to force him to use his A1. Now, as it says here, it's not going to attack the person who provoked it. The A1 is still going to target whoever has the lowest HP, but it's going to force him to do his A1, which is really good. I mean, it already basically does this with counterattack, right? If you ever have them steal your counterattack buff, you'll have seen this happen, that he won't counterattack whoever hits him. He's going to counterattack whoever's the lowest HP instead. Like weird stuff like that. So some things like that can happen. I'm pretty sure that's how it works anyway. Right, let's dive in though. Who do we want to look at here? Who are these next god tier champions when it comes to these to provoke, and how is this going to change up our compositions? Because I think this could make an absolutely huge change. I'm going to be testing this most likely on stream on Tuesday, presuming I'm well enough. But yeah, so let's go in. Okay, so for the S plus tier, it's really no surprise, guys, that Krisk remains up there. He was before this the best champion in the game for Hydra, and he is now even better as the best champion in the game for Hydra, because not only does he bring the decreased speed, not only does he bring ally protection, continuous heals on himself that lets him tank Head of Mischief, he also brings that provoke on a 3-turn cooldown with increased defense on himself and speed on your allies. And of course, doing all this fun stuff with his passive too. So he brings a provoke on a 3-turn cooldown. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how much provokes or how many provokes we need in the team to consistently lock down the head, because I feel like there's not much point in provoking it once or twice and then it gets its cleanse off anyway, and it might be kind of random. You kind of want to either have enough provokes to always lock it down, which is going to be a complete game changer, or maybe just not bother. But I think locking it down is going to be the way. This is a very consistent source of it. One issue, he doesn't give himself increased speed. So bringing another increased speed buff on the team is not really super useful, because he's already bringing it for the other 5 champions. Another source of increased speed is just giving it to him, you know? But it might still be worth it. And it might be possible, right? With increased speed, with enough speed on your Krisk, and with decreased speed on that head, it might be possible, maybe, to keep provoke out there. But I think you're going to most likely want some supplemental provokes as well. But still, hey, guess what? The best champion for Hydra, bringing a provoke every 3 turns, is going to make it a lot easier to fill in the provokes on the rest of your team. So Krisk, he's your number 1 without any question. Now, number 2 in the S+ tier, let me tell you a little secret. So there's 2 steps to this secret. Number 1 is that I actually recommend Hell Hades' website for this. It's the best way by far. Check it out. You can search for Provoke Champions on Hell Hades' website, and they show you every single champion in the game that can place provokes, either in AoE or with single target. That's step 1 of this secret. Now, step 2 of this secret is this. I can actually tell you every single champion off the top of my head that is a Provoke champion in Raid Shadow Legends. Here's the secret. Every champion can be a Provoke champion. Wait, what? What? Seriously. It's one of the most underrated armor sets in the game. I actually use it on my Torment, and it's God tier for Doom Tower Hard. So good. 30% chance to place Provoke debuff with the Taunting set. So I'm slightly memeing with this, but I'm actually dead serious. I think this is going to be an absolutely huge set. You get it from Ice Golem, and this is going to be God tier for Hydra. I think in particular, who are you going to run this set on? 2 sorts of champions. The most obvious one is someone like Torment with an AoE A1, like all their attacks are AoE. I want to talk about the second set first, which I think is going to be maybe a bit more relevant, which is basically anyone that's really easy to build stat-wise for Hydra, that's very forgiving stat-wise. And I think a good indicator is anyone that I've ever recommended that you build them in a Guardian set for Hydra, you're now probably better off building them in a Taunting set for Hydra. That's probably more worthwhile, because you're going to deny more damage from the Hydra heads by preventing the cleanses and keeping all your debuffs on them, keeping them controlled, than you will by using the Guardian set. So I think some key examples, some really good examples. This is going to surprise you're going to laugh at these guys. I tell you, you're going to laugh. Who are some of these best Provoke champions? I'm serious. Ugo. Yep. I think Ugo in a Taunting set, because what's Ugo doing? AoE attack every 3 turns, putting the block buffs, and then her A1 is actually really good as well. Her A3 is sort of situational, actually even better now, because it removes heal reduction, which that Head of Decay is going to be spamming more. So Ugo just got way better. Very easy to build Ugo. She just needs really good speed, good accuracy, and that's it. Then you sort of crank her HP as much as possible. You can see I never even bothered rolling up her accessories. It just didn't really matter. She's so easy to build. So yeah, you might try get her in like a Taunting chest with accuracy, or potentially like a Perception chest with accuracy if you need to crank that accuracy higher. But I think it should be pretty doable to get her high accuracy, high speed, Taunting set, and boom, you're good. Here's another one. Again, you're going to laugh at this. Geomancer. Seriously, Geomancer. Reflex set is what we typically run him in right now, right? Because you get your skills back more often, so you get your HP burn up in all the different Hydra heads. Well, guess what? That's not as crucial anymore. Huh? Well, because if we stop the dude even cleansing them, it's so much easier to keep that burn up on everything. It's so much more forgiving. We consistently have decreased speed on them. We consistently, we just keep the burns up on multiple heads. So they're never cleansed away. So suddenly, I think actually Geomancer in Taunting set is great. Because yeah, every 3 turns, he's going to be doing a non-attack, so he can't taunt. But the other 2 turns, he's nearly always doing Tremor Staff, which is an AoE that can now taunt. And he's very forgiving in terms of stats. So yeah, replace your Reflex sets with Taunting sets. Potentially, and Geomancer could be really strong. Another one, prepare to laugh once again. Inquisitor Shamail, a champion that you can definitely run in Guardian. So there's obviously a few different ways to build Inquisitor Shamail. This is like a sort of just very generic one where he's not doing anything much special. He just has lots of HP, and that's kind of it. He just has some random damage. He's literally just there for his passive, right? He's just there to cleanse the fears, to beat Head of Torment. You stick him in a taunting set, and I actually don't know how it works, right? Because he counterattacks with this skill whenever an enemy places a debuff. So I don't know. Whenever the Head of Decay places heal reduction, does he counterattack and give you that 30% chance to taunt every time? I don't know, but it's just like a nice source. You just have him shoot Head of Decay every single time and just try to keep up that provoke. I think that's a pretty solid thing to do because he's really not reliant on sets. You could even sort of triple down, maybe, in a very intensive build and just build him slow but with lots of resistance and a taunting set and lots of HP. And he could be like a sort of, if you got a blood shield ring, he could maybe be a mischief tank, an answer to Head of Torment, and a decent source of some provokes for the Decay Head all at the same time, which is hilarious. Then in terms of AoE A1s, really anyone with AoE A1s, I think Mother Cybele, I gotta shout her out. She's one of my favorites, right, as you guys know. But she's got such a good A1 with also this speed aura, so she's a very strong option. For lots of these rotations, right? She's just going to be spamming this A1, giving herself turn meter. Her base speed is 115. Her base stats are just insane in general. So she's a very strong option as well for an example of AoE A1's taunting. So anything like that. And there's lots of other options too, guys. Lots of other options. Now, let's jump over to what I'm going to call the S tier. Actually, the first champion from S tier sort of overlaps here. And that's for me, Coronar. Coronar is extremely good for Hydra. Extremely, extremely good. Why is he so strong? It's because he always counterattacks when he's hit by enemies under decreased attack, decreased defense, decreased speed debuffs. And his A1 is an AoE. That hits, it hits decently hard. It hits pretty well. And it's just the fact that he's always counterattacking. He can keep proccing War Master against these heads. But again, you stick him in a taunting set, and whenever he's hit, he's going to counterattack. He's going to hit all the heads, doing good War Master damage. And he's going to be, again, landing the provokes quite consistently with that. On top of that, he does have, when booked, a 3-turn cooldown with a 100% chance to put provoke AoE with this. Now, this, I think, is going to be more of an emergency thing, I think. But it does give you a guaranteed provoke if you need it, if he hasn't landed it with his A1. So that's something to consider. Give some block debuffs, increased defense. You need to be a little bit careful with Head of Mischief, not to have too many buffs and have him be targeted if you don't have him built with enough resistance. But if you do have him built with enough resistance, then it could be totally fine. Then he also has this, which is really good too, 4-turn cooldown when booked, which is AoE decreased attack. So that's brilliant to bring to lock down the Head of Wrath's damage. He also can put decreased defense if they already have decreased attack. So he's doing a lot of stuff for your team. Very, very strong. And you just don't underestimate his damage output. His damage output is very good because of all these counterattacks and War Master and those counterattacks with taunting set, with this decreased attack. There's a lot of utility there, a lot of damage, and yeah, his damage is, if they nerf the defense numbers a lot, his damage is going to be very, very high. It's going to climb a lot comparative to Geomancer, Royal Guard, etc. if they nerf the attack and defense of these heads enough. So we'll see. We're not in this faction. In the other faction that's like this faction, Skull Lord Vargal. He's next up in S tier. I think this guy is absolutely incredible. He's one of your best mischief tanks, and guess what? His mischief tanking move is also now your counter decay move. So he's god tier. Look at his base stat. His base stats are absurdly good. Like, absurdly good. But check this out. Skull Claim, when booked, 2-turn cooldown. Put Strengthen on him for 2 turns and 100% chance when booked to provoke a target enemy for 1 turn. So he has a guaranteed provoke on a 2-turn cooldown. Again, his stats are so good, you can easily build him to be fast and still be amazing at everything else, right? So he can be strengthening himself. If you do not bring Strengthen on your team, and especially if you can get him in a Blood Shield accessory, he can be a pretty consistent mischief tank, one of the better ones, while also providing good coverage of provokes on Head of Decay. Again, with some supplement like an Ugo in there as well, with to cover any mischief things gone wrong with her block buffs, to cover with some taunting set procs, potentially to cover some of these gaps here. It might work really well. Have to test it, but I think it's got good potential. He also brings AoE decrease attack on a 3-turn cooldown, 100% chance. Really helps with Head of Wrath as well, on top of having a pretty decent A1. I don't know if these repeat hits can trigger multiple taunting set procs or whatever, but Either way, he's a very good option. What else? He does some revives and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know. He does some fun stuff, but he's really good for Hydra. Really, really good. Now, the other champion that's really jumped up here, Kantra the Cyclone. You guys know she's one of my most wanted. And I just think she's super good. And she just became even better. Her A1 can steal buffs. That's very useful, very handy. Steal increased attack from Wrath, for example. Very nice to bring. Then her A3 is amazing. 3-turn cooldown, triple hit AoE. Each hit having a, when booked, 75%. You could mastery that up to 80% chance to put one debuff for 2 turns. So you get 3 of these debuffs potentially for 2 turns. Block buffs, decrease attack, decrease speed, weaken, decrease accuracy, heal reduction. It's just a great set of debuffs to bring. Really, really nice. And I mean, if we are able to provoke decay constantly, and you bring some like debuff extenders, someone like Thylesia, who also brings Hex, for example, you could be looking at some really cool stuff. So lots of options there, but great stuff there. But this happens as well. Decreases enemies' accuracy by 10 for each debuff they're under. Really useful against all of these Hydra heads, especially Mischief. Less damage for each debuff. Heals yourself whenever debuffs expire. Great. But this one is big. 75% chance to place Provoke for 1 turn on enemies under 5 or more debuffs at the start of this champion's turns. And she can also, by the way, put her debuffs on weak hits, which is super nice. But yeah, I mean, you just build her with relatively decent speed, and then just whenever she takes a turn, she's just 75% chance to provoke every turn she gets for free. And it's going to be so easy because you're stopping those cleanses to have 5 debuffs. So it's pretty much like, you know, you'd need to guarantee perhaps a provoke on turn 1 to stop decay with his initial cleanse. Or you could even just let him get away with the initial cleanse, then slap your debuffs on, and then she should start getting those provokes very consistently. So she's going to be super good for this. Accuracy in all battles by 62 is great. So Kantra's amazing. S tier. I think she's going to be super good. And then the other one I think is obviously super good is the new guy, Bivald, the current fragment collector. He's going to be S tier as well, I think. AoE provoke with leech as well. That gives him a strengthen too. On a 3-turn cooldown. So we've got that potential maybe for some Mischief tanking. I don't know if I'm really convinced on that with him. I don't know if it's that important. You know, he'd be very good, for example, with Lydia. Him and Lydia together, I think it'd be great. And then the strengthen doesn't really do anything. But yeah, look, guaranteed provoke. Lands the provoke on weak hits, so affinity doesn't matter. And he's going to do that every 3 turns. On top of that, his A1, when booked, is a 50% chance to provoke for 1 turn. Lands it even on weak hits. So he's going to get a guaranteed provoke out here, and then he's going to be landing provokes half the time on his A1. Very, you know, it's not super reliable, but it's probably reliable enough to get it up most of the time, considering with decreased speed, increased speed, you should be taking way more turns than the head is gonna be taking. So you should be good. And then whenever you're safe and you do have provoke out, you can hit them with the Briar Nexus, which should now do actually really good solid damage. Give your team a solid heal, give your team a solid shield as well. So it's just going to make your team tankier. Nice HP in all battles aura as well. So I think Bivald is actually going to be great. And especially as a fragment champion, very accessible. So I think he's S tier for me, just because he's an accessible option. I don't know if he's going to be the best, like for end game teams, because you probably don't need like the healing, and you can probably get away with like, you know, Krisk and some taunting sets on like your Ugo Shamail or whatever. So I don't know if he's like super end game, but for like, you know, as that accessible champion, he's sort of unparalleled, I think. So he's really good. Next up then, we've got the A tier. I think these are some champions that do some stuff really cool, but are not going to be as good. They're either a bit too limited in their utility, or they're maybe not reliable enough. Now, the first one I want to talk about is Husk. So we're sticking with those sort of meta champions. Husk is obviously meta. Well, we'll see after the HP changes, right? But Despair, absolutely huge damage, big max HP hit. He's got really good base HP, so he's very easy to keep alive. Less utility than Royal Guard, or at least that was the case up until now. The reason being is A1 has a 20% books to a 40% chance to put provoke for 1 turn. So this is not very reliable. That's all he's going to have, and you're obviously going to want to prioritize Despair whenever you can. But that's a lot of extra bonus provokes. So for example, in like your super meta team, you'd have a Duchess, a Krisk, an Ugo, a Husk, a Royal Guard, and a Geomancer, right? We bring in that team, and if we've got Ugo in a provoke set, a taunting set, we've got Krisk doing his provoke, and then we've got Husk backing it up with his A1. Like, we get into that situation, even put Geomancer in a taunting set as well. And at that point, I'm actually feeling like it's probably overkill. That's probably too much, you know, but it's just showing you some of these ideas for what can work. I think it's a very good supplemental source of provokes. I think Seeker is actually just in this weekend's 10 times event. He's got a very good A1 provoke too, 50% chance to provoke for 1 turn on his A1, which isn't the best, right? It's not the best, but it's decent. And the nice thing is that he brings a lot of other utility. So specifically, he's bringing you, because this gives him an extra turn, it's effectively a 2-turn cooldown, 30% turn meter boost with 50% increased attack buff. So that could be potentially very good. It's a lot of turn meter, which is nice, very nice. And then on top of that, it also, because of the extra turn, he's basically rolling this 50% chance every single attack, which is great. You could put this guy as well in that taunting set for that double chance to provoke. You could absolutely do it. And then, of course, if these more traditional nukers become more impactful in Hydra, increased attack might be kind of important to have in there. Whereas up until now, like Husk and Royal Guard, Geomancer, they don't need increased attack at all. So, I mean, they benefit somewhat, but not enough to bother. But that might change, in which case he's bringing you some good utility. This is kind of nice, but you're not going to get crit very much. So I think he has some nice utility, Seeker. So he's worth considering. Now, obviously, in terms of, it's worth mentioning these A1 provokes. Sorry, not A1, but in terms of the best provoker single target, War Chief is like the creme de la creme, but he doesn't do anything else. This move, Marauder, even unbooked, provoke for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. So without any books, and really with very minimal gear requirements, almost no requirements at all, you can just have War Chief saunter in and lock down Decay permanently with basically no effort. Now, he can weak hit. That's the only thing. But, I mean, that's pretty good. Now, the thing is, he doesn't really do anything else. He reflects some damage back. I don't think this actually does very much. And then he has this triple hitter that can also place provoke, but none of the other heads can be provoked, and he's always going to have Decay provoked anyway. But hey, look, he might be really good. I mean, he's so simple to make work, right? I mean, it's done. Like, it's just always provoked. Bam, done. But that's all he does. So I don't know if that's enough to make him good, but it's certainly enough to make it very easy to do that. So it's definitely worth pointing out. I do consider him probably to be only A tier, though, because of that. I feel like you want people with more utility. I do have to give a special shout out to a rare champion that can do something similar too, which is Sentinel. He's really good. His A1, 60% chance of placing provoke if he crits. That actually books up to a, excuse me, not a 75, 85%. He's an 85% chance to provoke on his A1 if he crits. So yeah, again, varies a lot based off of affinity, but if he's a good affinity, that's a really good chance to provoke on that A1. Now, his base speed is pretty miserable at 86. That's one of the worst in the game, but it's not bad. He also heals himself at the start of every 2 turns, I guess. And he has an AoE that can but decrease attack, the small version, but hey, it's something. So I don't know. Look, he's a rare, and he's really good for some of those secret rooms and stuff like that. So he's definitely a rare champion that's worth watching out for now, right? Just because of this, I think it's super good. So he's well worth shouting out. In a similar vein, need to give a shout out to the Black Knight, or just Black Knight, actually. He has 75% chance to provoke on his A1. Just straight up 75% chance. The nice thing about Black Knight is that his A3 is almost entirely useless. His passive is really not going to be very useful at all for Hydra, but he does bring lower visor, which is kind of nice when it's booked up. 2-turn cooldown, continuous heal and increased defense on all allies for 2 turns. So that's actually kind of good, right? If he gets ahead of that Hydra and he's really locking it down, you can then slip in a nice continuous heal, increased defense for your team. So he does bring some nice utility. It's not the most guaranteed provoke, but it's probably good enough. Probably. And he can get some nice heals in as well. I use him on Magma Dragon, and he's not perfect, but he works most of the time. So I'm intrigued to see how that's going to work out, but definitely worth calling him out. And then finally, I'm going to put this guy in the A tier as well. Sigmund, so underrated. He's so good. He's so good. Shield of the Realm, big shield, strength and buff on your whole team, 3-turn cooldown. It's Mithrala's move without the cleanse. So it's obviously a good chunk worse because no cleanse, but this is still an incredible move for Hydra. The shield is so useful to protect you from Wrath. The strengthen is so useful to protect you from Wrath. The shield and strengthen, you stop taking damage, you don't get healed as much, or you're not going to be healing yourself as much necessarily. So less max HP decrease from decay. All really useful stuff. His A1 can strip some buffs. His passive can strip some buffs. It can also it can decrease buffs, good chance against bosses. Then this is A2. This has changed. So his A2 is effectively a guaranteed decrease attack, like 100% chance of decrease attack. He gets 2 rolls of it. So even if it's bad affinity, it's still a really good chance to place it, which is great. Really good for those heads. Then it also does this AoE provoke. So 75% chance, but you get 2 rolls of it. So very consistent sort of 3-turn cooldown provoke. So he brings a lot to your team. He's bringing buff removal. He is bringing really good shielding and just protection. Then that decreased attack, the provoke. He makes your team so tanky. I actually feel like he's often better than Mithrala, believe it or not, for Hydra. Because that decreased attack AoE plus this stuff often ends up being a bit more useful. Like the Hex and stuff that she brings is not necessarily quite as good. They're very similar sort of champions. And like Mithrala is insane. So Sigmund is obviously insane as well when it comes to Hydra stuff. And for Doom Tower too, especially with this. So he's well worth considering. Very good option. Very, very good. And anyone who's sort of like him, like a 3-turn cooldown provoke for 1 turn, is not going to probably be enough on its own, but it's a really good source of stuff to help you out. So I think this new guy, who looks really cool, and I think he's going to match the new champion, the free legendary. This guy you get ages into Doom Tower, but I think he can provoke as well. But Vizix is worth calling out too. Login champion, great. So everyone gets her. She's a great champion, so good for progression in Doom Tower hard. But she has provoke guaranteed AoE on that 3-turn cooldown. So every 3 turns she takes, she is going to provoke decay, which is really good. On top of that, she brings decreased speed. She brings ally protection. Now her turn meter steal is not any use here. Ally protection can get her killed, all that sort of stuff. But look, she's a guaranteed champion that you're probably going to be building up anyway. And you put her in there with another source of provoke or 2. And she could be a really good source, you know, a really good champ to bring to your team who's bringing provoke and decreased speed. They're 2 really good debuffs now for Hydra. So an ally protection is great to have as well. So a free champion, easy to get, and really helping you fill out those teams. So a lot of stuff to consider. Again, she's sort of B tier, and there's lots of other champions as well. Like we jump over to Hell Hades, there's lots of other champions that do similar things. Drexthar's another good one to mention. He can do an AoE provoke on a 3-turn cooldown, and then of course his passive putting out HP burns. Excellent budget option. He maybe should even be A tier because he's so accessible, right? You can get him after playing the game for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months or so. So he's really good, like Brago. There's lots of champions here that are bringing some provokes, but not tons, like Nari the Lucky, Raf Matab. Lots of good options. Martyr is going to be great. Lots and lots of really good options, guys. But you get the idea. They're the ones I would particularly call out. I hope you found it useful. Sorry, it's a bit long. My voice is fading a little bit. But yeah, there you go. I think this could be a game changer. Stay tuned for later this week. I'm going to be testing stuff out and obviously bringing lots of guides with the new rotation too. So yeah, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.